I am Cerulean Voss, Chief Archivist of the Atrazen Conservatory of Galactic History. What follows is not merely an account, it is a warning. I record these events with trembling fingers, not out of fear for what has happened, but for what may come, should the lesson be forgotten. The humans call it proportional response. The galaxy calls it terror. I call it inevitable. In the grand cosmic ledger, where civilizations are measured and judged, we have long classified species by their technological prowess, territorial reach, and martial capacity. The Gahari Dominion stood mighty among the second-tier powers, 12 worlds, 6 billion souls, 3,000 years of spacefaring history. Humanity was but a footnote barely 80 years beyond their first interstellar voyage. A curious species from a water-rich world, remarkable only for their adaptability and their unusual social structures. How catastrophically we misunderstood them. Every established power makes the same mistake, eventually conflating youth with weakness, restraint with inability. The satellite Concordat, our august galactic governing body, treated humans as one treats a child at an adult gathering, acknowledged when necessary, humored occasionally, but never truly respected. I remember when they first petitioned for membership. The Gahari representative High Marshal Vextral openly laughed during their presentation. They have barely mastered antimatter confinement, he had said, mandibles clicking in amusement. And they think themselves ready to join the Concordat. The humans' ambassador, a silver-haired woman named Eliza Durant, had simply smiled. Not the reaction expected from a lesser species being publicly humiliated. I noted it in my personal records. Humans do not show shame when mocked by perceived superiors. Curious, behavioral anomaly. How terribly I misunderstood the meaning of that smile. They were admitted, of course. Not because they were respected, but because the Treaty of Inclusion allowed the Concordat to regulate their expansion. The Gahari and other middle powers particularly insisted on strict boundaries for human colonial efforts. Humans were assigned the Outer Arc, a cold, resource-poor region in the galactic periphery. Again, Ambassador Durant merely smiled and signed the terms. "We'll make do," she said. "Humans are quite good at that." For 30 years they made do indeed. Their colonies grew slowly but steadily. 23 worlds. Small populations, modest infrastructure. They traded, they learned, they integrated into galactic commerce with surprising speed. They asked questions, endless questions about everything: propulsion theory, xenobiology, governance structures. Many found it charming, others irritating. Few recognized it for what it was: methodical study. Eden's Reach was their 24th colony, a temperate world orbiting a stable yellow star in the Outer Arc's Jasper Belt. Unremarkable, except for its location precisely 0.87 parsecs from a classified Gahari resource corridor. The Concordat regulations permitted settlement at 0.75 parsecs, or greater, so the colony was by every legal standard legitimate. The Gahari didn't see it that way. High Marshal Vextral, now elevated to Dominion Executor, had developed what humans might call an obsession. He dedicated considerable resources to monitoring human activity. Reports suggest he had become convinced that humans were an existential threat, not for what they were, but for what they might become if left unchecked. A projection from the Gahari Strategic Command estimated that at their current growth rate, humans would equal Dominion economic output within 230 years. This was deemed unacceptable. The official record claims that humans violated territorial boundaries with Eden's Reach through a measurement discrepancy. There was no discrepancy. There was only opportunity. I write this now with the luxury of hindsight, having accessed sealed records through channels I will not disclose. The Gahari attack was premeditated, designed specifically to establish dominance, while remaining technically within the bounds of Concordat law. They believed the humans, still dependent on galactic infrastructure, and trade, would accept the loss with nothing more than diplomatic protests. The eradication of Eden's Reach was executed with horrifying precision. At 0426 Galactic Standard Time, A Gahari battle group, consisting of 3 dreadnoughts, and their escort vessels emerged from superluminal transit at the edge of the system. No warning was transmitted. No evacuation was permitted. Kinetic impactors, each carrying the energy equivalent of a small nuclear device, struck every settlement within 4 minutes. The atmospheric defense grid managed to intercept only 2 of 67 projectiles. The colony's 2 orbital platforms, unarmed as required by concordant regulations for peripheral settlements, were vaporized by particle lances. 92,416 humans perished in the attack. Among them were 34,000 children. I have reviewed the Gahari operational logs. The final communication between Executor Vextral and Fleet Commander Hezkaral continues to haunt me. Confirmation of total settlement neutralization, Executor. Excellent. Survivors. None detected, sir. Shall we deploy surface teams to verify? Unnecessary. The message has been sent. The message was sent indeed, but not the one they intended. The Concordant Council convened an emergency session upon notification of the attack. I attended as the Atrazen historical witness, a position my species has held since the Council's founding. The human delegation was notably absent. For 16 hours, the Council deliberated. The Gahari representative presented their case: suspected human military installations beneath Eden's reach, evidence of surveillance directed at the resource corridor, ambiguous readings suggesting restricted technology. All fabrications as internal Gahari communications would later reveal. When the Council called for Earth to present their response, they received only a brief text communication. The United Earth Government acknowledges the Council's session and will address the matter directly. The Talaxian delegate, who had often championed human causes, attempted to reach Earth's diplomatic corps, but reported all channels had gone silent. Interstellar commerce vessels noted that every human ship throughout the galaxy had ceased ordinary operations and was returning to human territory at maximum velocity. The Council ultimately issued what amounted to a reprimand to the Gahari and offered deepest sympathies to Earth for their loss. No sanctions were imposed, no reparations demanded. The attack was classified as a gray zone dispute under Section 23 of the Concordant Charter. I remember the Gahari delegation leaving the chamber mandibles held high in the posture of vindication. Several council members even approached them afterward, seeking private assurances that their own interests near human space would be respected in the future. As I gathered my recording equipment, the Talaxian delegate Morisul approached me. Unlike the others, her facial membranes displayed the purple hue of extreme distress. "They do not understand what they have done," she whispered. "The Council," I asked. "All of them. The humans value life differently than we do. She trailed off, mandibles trembling. They what? They do not forget. And they do not distinguish between those who act and those who stand aside." Her words seemed hyperbolic at the time. Many species claim to never forget an injury. Few maintain such grudges beyond a reasonable diplomatic interval. 72 hours after the Council session concluded, long-range observatories in the Kelvashi sector detected an unusual distortion entering the Gahari home system. The readings were inconsistent with any known propulsion system, not a ship in the conventional sense, but a controlled field of some kind, precisely calibrated and deliberately directed. The Gahari Defense Command dispatched interceptors. None returned. What happened next defies conventional explanation and has been partially classified by Concordant Security Directive 42A. I include it here because the truth, however terrifying, must be preserved. The Gahari star began to die, not in the natural way of stellar evolution, but systematically, as though being unwoven thread by thread. The process began at the stellar corona, with precisely targeted energy extractions that created cascading instabilities in the star's magnetic field. These instabilities propagated inward, disrupting fusion processes in patterns that defied random distribution. Scientists who have reviewed the data describe it as a stellar vivisection, a methodical dismantling of a star by means unknown to current physics. The Gahari, realizing the existential threat, launched their entire home fleet against the distortion field. Weapons had no effect. Attempts to escape the system were thwarted by localized space-time distortions that trapped ships in recursive loops, forever trying to break free of the system's gravity well. The process took 19 hours. Billions watched through observatory feeds as the Gahari central star collapsed in a manner that released minimal radiation or shockwaves, a controlled stellar execution that confined destruction to the Gahari system, while eliminating it completely. In the final moments, as the star's core underwent its engineered collapse, every communication device in the galaxy simultaneously received a single image, a human hand palm, forward, fingers spread. An ancient human gesture meaning, stop. No further message was transmitted, none was needed. 6 billion Gahari, their entire civilization, every monument and achievement, every child and elder, every historical record and cultural artifact gone. Not through random violence or natural catastrophe, but through deliberate, calculated erasure. The Concordat Council reconvened immediately. Panic does not adequately describe the atmosphere. Species that had existed in Cold War for centuries suddenly found themselves allied by fear. Intelligence agencies that had never shared information began pooling resources, desperately searching for any data on human technological capabilities. They found nothing, not because information didn't exist, but because it had been systematically removed from every database, every archive, every repository throughout known space. Reports written about human technology had been redacted or deleted entirely. Research collaborations involving human scientists had been scrubbed of meaningful content. The galaxy discovered that while we had been studying humans with casual interest, they had been studying us with methodical purpose and controlling exactly what we learned about them. 3 days later, a human diplomatic vessel requested permission to dock at the Concordat Citadel. Permission was granted with unprecedented haste. I was present when they entered the council chamber. 3 individuals, Ambassador Zarai, a tall woman with skin the color of aged copper and eyes that revealed nothing. Dr. Miko Tanaka, scientific advisor, who carried herself with the detached interest of one observing specimens in a laboratory. And Admiral James Wolfe, a military figure of imposing physical presence, despite the ceremonial nature of his uniform. They took their seats without ceremony or acknowledgement of the historic weight of the moment. The presiding voice of the council, Divexun, abandoned all diplomatic protocol. "What have you done?" he asked voice modulator, unable to fully mask his horror. Ambassador Zarai answered with perfect composure. "We have responded to an act of genocide with appropriate measures." "You destroyed an entire star system." The presiding voice's tendrils quivered with emotion. 6 billion lives. 92,416, said Admiral Wolfe, his voice deep and controlled. That was the population of Eden's Reach. Civilians all. 34,000 of them children. This goes beyond any proportional response, said the Nexari delegate, his crystalline form pulsing with agitated light. This is extinction. Dr. Tanaka finally spoke, her voice clinical and precise. Proportionality is a subjective standard. The Gahari determined that our colony was worth exterminating to send a message. We simply acknowledged their communication and responded in kind. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices and translation fields. The cacophony lasted 7 minutes before the presiding voice managed to restore order. "What weapon did you deploy?" demanded the Kithvakar representative, a species known for their martial culture. Nothing in known physics could induce such a precisely controlled stellar collapse. The 3 humans exchanged glances. Admiral Wolfe spoke with a hint of a smile. "You call it a weapon, we call it insurance." The silence that followed held more terror than any shouted threat could have conveyed. Ambassador Zarai placed a small data crystal on the table before her. "We have prepared a simple proposal for the Council's consideration. First, formal acknowledgement that Eden's Reach was a legitimate settlement under Concordat law. Second, a full transmission to all concordant members of the War Crimes Judgment against those council members who declined to take action against the Gahari. She paused, looking directly at the presiding voice. And finally, a binding resolution that no further action will be taken against human settlement ships or citizens by any concordant member under any circumstance without prior diplomatic resolution through channels to be established. Or what? Asked the presiding voice, though the answer was clear to all present. Admiral Wolf answered, "There will be no or what. Either the galaxy is governed by laws that protect all, or it is governed by power alone. You have now seen what the latter option entails." The Council voted unanimously to accept the human terms. The resolution was drafted, approved, and enacted within 6 hours, the fastest legislative action in concordant history. As the human delegation prepared to depart, I approached them driven by the historian's eternal curse of curiosity. Ambassador Zerai acknowledged me with a slight nod. "Suril and Voss," she said. "The Atrazen have always been fair chroniclers." "I seek understanding," I said, "not justification." "Then you are unique among your colleagues today," she replied. "Will there be retaliation for what was done to the Gahari?" I asked. Dr. Tanaka answered, "That would require establishing that something was done to them at all. Stellar physics is complex. Accidents happen. You're claiming it was a natural phenomenon?" I couldn't mask my disbelief. Admiral Wolf's expression might have been amusement. "Official records will show that the Gahari star experienced a rare, but not unprecedented type of magnetic reconnection cascade. Tragic, but entirely natural." "No one will believe that," I said. "They don't need to believe it," said Ambassador Zerai. "They simply need to be unable to prove otherwise." As they turned to leave, I asked one final question. "Was it always within your capability, this stellar engineering?" Dr. Tanaka paused. "Humanity has devoted more of its scientific resources to defensive technologies than all other concordant species combined. Not because we wish for conflict, but because we understand that in a galaxy of diverse moral frameworks, deterrence is the only universal language." They departed, leaving the Council, and the galaxy forever changed. The year that followed defied all predictions from concordant strategic analysts. Humans did not leverage their revealed power to expand territory. They did not demand technology transfers or resource concessions. Their diplomatic corps resumed normal operations. Their commercial vessels returned to established routes. To an outside observer, it might have appeared that the incident had changed nothing. But everything had changed. A buffer zone spontaneously formed around human space. No official decree established it, no treaty defined it. Yet every species instinctively withdrew their interests from a region extending roughly 12 parsecs from any human-claimed system. Concordant naval patrols rerouted to avoid proximity to human ships. Research outposts near human space were quietly relocated. Cultural exchange programs were maintained, but conducted exclusively on neutral stations. The humans never mentioned it. They simply accepted the distance as though they had expected it all along. 6 months after what would come to be called the Gahari dissolution, I received an anonymous data transfer while researching in the Kelvashi archives. It contained classified files on what humans had designated Project Eventide. The verification markers indicated authentic human military documentation, though how it came into my possession remains a mystery I choose not to solve. The files revealed that humans had begun development of stellar manipulation technology 27 years earlier, barely 50 years into their interstellar era, and long before they had encountered the Gahari. The project had not been created in response to any specific threat, but as a contingency against a possibility their planners had always considered inevitable, that humanity would eventually encounter a species that would mistake their restraint for weakness. More disturbing was the revelation that Eventide was merely one of 17 distinct strategic deterrent systems, each designed around a different foundational principle of physics. The files referred to sister projects with names like Dark River, Obsidian Cord, and Lazarus Protocol, offering only tantalizing hints of capabilities equally devastating, but entirely different in application. The existence of these programs contradicted everything the galaxy thought it knew about human technological development. Their public research focused on medicine, environmental management, and quality of life improvements. Their military technology, while respectable, had always been assessed as defensive and conventional. Nothing suggested they possessed knowledge that fundamentally transcended the Concordate's shared scientific understanding. Yet they had been developing these systems in parallel with their public technology for decades, advancing along hidden paths of scientific inquiry that our greatest minds had either overlooked or dismissed as theoretical. Why hadn't they used these technologies to dominate? Why maintain the charade of being a minor power when they could have demanded a seat among the Concordate's ruling elite? The answer came in the final file, a position paper from Earth's Strategic Command titled The Gardner Doctrine. Humanity's long-term security is best served not by revealing technological superiority, but by maintaining it as a deterrent while appearing non-threatening. We seek not dominion, but longevity. The gardener does not compete with the plants. They create conditions where all can flourish while maintaining the tools to remove threats to the garden's health. I have spent the years since these events trying to reconcile what I know of humans with what the galaxy believes. They are not conquerors by nature, despite their capacity for overwhelming force. They are not vengeful beyond proportion, despite the Gahari's fate. They are perhaps something more unsettling pragmatists with an absolute commitment to survival. The galaxy has stabilized in the new reality. The Concordate continues its function. Trade flows. Diplomacy proceeds. But beneath the surface of ordinary relations runs a current of profound awareness. Humanity has demonstrated not only the willingness to destroy those who threaten them, but the capacity to do so in ways we cannot detect, prevent, or even fully understand. Some call this peace. Others, a hostage situation. The philosophers of my own species suggest it is merely the natural order, asserting itself in any ecosystem. All creatures eventually learn which predators to avoid, not through constant violence, but through rare, unforgettable demonstrations. I conclude this record with words I overheard from a junior human officer at a diplomatic function speaking to a colleague who had questioned their restricted expansion policy. If you shoot a human child, the universe will learn its final lesson. There is wisdom in these words, terrible though it may be. They contain both promise and warning, the essence of humanity distilled to its core truth. They do not seek conquest. They do not crave domination. But they have drawn a boundary around their existence that they will defend with forces that reshape reality itself. The stars continue to shine. The galaxy continues to turn. And humanity watches from their modest corner of it, hands extended in greeting, but capable, we now know, of closing into fists that can extinguish suns. This is Surilin Voss, Chief Archivist of the Atrazen Conservatory of Galactic History, completing this record. May those who find it in ages hence understand that peace has many architects, and sometimes the most enduring structures are built upon foundations of awe and terror in equal measure. May we never forget the lesson of the Gahari, lest we become the subject of the next demonstration.